So I always hung out with people in the military intellectual area. I first heard Herman Kahn speak, I think at the University of Chicago and then later at Harvard. Now Herman Kahn was a very interesting fellow. He was football shaped, very large, and very jolly, but he had written a book called On Thermonuclear War with such scary chapter titles as Will the Living Envy the Dead? From which I think the Grateful Dead got their name, but I'm not sure. And I interviewed for a job with him and Max Singer, and remember driving around with this huge man in this tiny car, but they didn't hire me. I got a job with Dr. Lilly in his dolphin lab instead in Miami. There was a young fellow I was hanging out with, he was my age. We were both singing in the local coffee house. I was singing with my banjo, he with his guitar. His name was David Crosby. And we would hang out and read Playboy together and joke about thermonuclear war. One day he came to my house, saw that I had a shelf of books on strategy, including on thermonuclear war, and he seemed very perturbed because it was okay to joke about it, but not to take it seriously. I don't know. Someone should write a history of World War III. Now you say World War III didn't happen. Right, but every year from 1946 it could have. And what were the preparations and what would have happened if the war had been fought at that time? Now, I have lots of pacifist friends, but I always believed that deterrence worked, and I believe that the deterrent system worked. For example, Operation Chrome Dome. I only heard of Operation Chrome Dome a couple of years ago, but in fact it's what you saw in Dr. Strangelove. Operation Chrome Dome was the continuous circulation around the Mediterranean of American B-52s ready for a nuclear strike against the Soviet Union, and a similar continuous circulation of B-52s ready to strike around the Arctic Circle. Well, thank God they didn't. And I think that's because the whole thing worked. And because people on both sides of great intelligence and great goodwill wanted there not to be a thermonuclear war. The Russians weren't stupid. Now, I took a strategy course at Harvard under a guy named Thomas C. Schiller, one of the most brilliant people I ever met, and I was very pleased to hear that he got the Nobel Prize last year. But it may very well be that shelling saved us from nuclear war. I don't know, but here was the argument he said in public. Nobody wants a nuclear war. Neither side. No. No way. But we can't disarm. That would be foolish. And we can't strike. That would be insane. So what can we do? It will tranquilize the situation so that decision makers will have every possible alternative to what nobody wants to happen. Let's begin with communication between both sides, ergo the hotline. Well, I thought of that a few years later when I was trying to quit smoking for the 30th time. I seriously tried to quit smoking on my 16th birthday, by which time I was already smoking 5 packs a day. And did not want this to go on. And I bought a book called How to Stop Smoking, and it said, you must resolve never to smoke again, and then make it stick. Well, that's great. And 2 months later, I was smoking again. So I went through this super resolution business several times, and obviously it grew stale. I knew I could not plausibly make such a resolution again, that I would smoke again. So sometime in the, I guess it was the 70s, I'm sure it's in my notes, I said to myself, well, what would Schelling do? Just as he said, we can't strike and we can't disarm. How can we get closer to what we want anyway? I said, okay, I can't go on smoking and I can't quit forever. How can I achieve the next best thing? Well, and also I can't smoke less than 4 packs a day. So make the smoking bouts shorter and further apart. Now, isn't that the only answer to that? Okay, how do we enforce their being shorter and further apart? Well, could there be something psychological that will help me not smoke for a long period of time, say a year until the next smoke? What can I do to be continually reminded of how awful smoking is, so that I don't take it up again for as long as possible? That decided, I found a mechanism that would allow me to end a smoking bout in such a way that I would not smoke again for a long time. But you have to understand the theory. I'll go through it one more time before I tell you the mechanism, because if you just tell someone the mechanism, they won't get it. The theory is you want the smoking bouts to be shorter and further apart. As short and as far apart as possible. Ideally, vanishing in smoking. So you want some way to remember, to make awful the recollection of smoking. Okay, that said, what is the mechanism by which I close a smoking bout? Answer, I eat a cigarette. Every crumb of tobacco. Not quickly. Take it slow, have a Diet Coke, whatever they do. Wash it down with any damn thing. But it's so god-awful that the memory stays with me vividly for several weeks, and then abstractly for a year. So, using this method, I have smoked only 1 day a year for the last 20-something years. I'm not sure. But if you say, do you smoke? And I say 1 day a year, you don't get the picture. And it's interesting, I've told this method to many people, and none of them tried it as far as I know. They say they want to quit. Now, I went back and visited Thomas Schelling in his office at Harvard in 1987. And I said, what are you doing these days? He said, well, I'm not working on nuclear war anymore. I'm taking up issues of self-command, such as how to stop smoking. And it seems that because he had been a lifelong smoker, he lectures in high schools and everything on how to stop smoking and how what a terrible thing it is. And I told him his method, which was a pure Schelling method that he hadn't thought of. He was gobsmacked. It was marvelous. I felt, as if as his student, I had handed in an A paper.